Let's see if I'm ready to go. I got my notes, check. Sunglasses, check. Hat, check. And my thick skin, check. Let's go. Golden Blue Dude back with another video just for the college football fan. So hit that like and subscribe button if you are a college football fan. And go check out our Patreon page when you get a chance. A lot of perks over there. And don't forget our score prediction contest will start back up again in September. Every week we award $20 to whoever gets the closest to the exact score prediction of the game that I pick. The higher the Patreon, the more guesses you get. And you can win as many times as you want. Also, $5 and up Patreons get to pick the live stream that we're going to do. And you get to watch the game with me. And we have a great website designed and created by Joey Foster. In this video, I wanted to step in the realm of purely hypothetical. This could never happen. It's not gonna happen. So don't give me all the technical reasons why it's not gonna happen. I already know. But today I want to talk about the Power 5 conferences. If they could, strictly based on football and basketball, who would they fire or kick out of their conference because of lack of success? Maybe they don't have a good brand. Maybe they're not bringing enough revenue. More towards that avenue. Which teams would get the boot from their own conferences in the Power 5? So I'm not talking about AAU status. I'm not talking about Tier 1 research facility. I'm not talking about founding members. None of that stuff. This is strictly based on football and basketball success, strength of brand, and how much revenue they would bring in. So here are the teams that I think would get the boot from each Power 5 conference. We'll start with the ACC. The teams that would most definitely not get the boot. Clemson. Clemson has been the ACC over the past decade. So besides Florida State, Clemson would be the only team that's made the playoffs and actually mattered. And definitely the only ACC team to win a national championship since the playoffs initiated. So of course, Clemson would be safe. Miami. Well, Miami hasn't had all that much success in the ACC, surprisingly. Only 3 seasons where they had a double-digit win season. But Miami has a very strong brand, and they do make some money for the ACC, so they're safe. I think Florida State's safe. They're down right now. Very, very down. But their strength of brand still very, very high. And they do have some great revenue coming in for the ACC. I think North Carolina would be safe. More for basketball, but their football is starting to come along as well under Mike Brown. So North Carolina's brand, you would be safe. I think Virginia Tech, you would be safe as well. Kind of the same situation as North Carolina and Florida State kind of put together. You're in a down year, but your football brand has been the strength of your program. Your basketball is starting to come around as well. I think Louisville would be safe. They have decent brand both in football and basketball. They're making a lot of money for the ACC. I think Louisville would most definitely be safe. I think Duke, based on their basketball, would be safe from getting the boot from the ACC. Football-wise, if this was strictly based on football, Duke would be getting the boot. But they have the saving grace of basketball. But now with Coach K retiring, does that take a step back? I think NC State would be safe. I think their brand is strong enough and they bring in enough money, they would not get the boot from the ACC. I think the same thing goes for Virginia. Their basketball brand is a little higher than their football brand right now, but I think they had a great hire in the offseason for their football program, so maybe the strength of that brand will grow as well. And then finally, Pitt. I think Pitt would barely be safe by the skin of their teeth. I think winning the ACC and having a double-digit win season would be their saving grace from last year. Otherwise, there's not much to talk about Pitt. Their basketball is atrocious right now, so their saving grace is actually football. How long can they keep up what they did last year? I don't think in fact, I think that's over. I think Pitt slides back down after a year like last year. But in the future, they could have another year like last year. The teams that I think would get the boot, the first team, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech used to have a very, very strong brand. They were good in basketball, and they were good in football. Remember, they won a national championship in the early 90s. Wow, that's crazy. Georgia Tech winning a national championship in recent college football history blows my mind. But as of right now, they would get the boot. Wake Forest would get the boot, in my opinion. Wake Forest used to have a really strong basketball brand. That's basically dead right now. Now, they did have a successful season last year in football, but they have proven that they cannot sustain that. Maybe having a year like that would save them, but in my opinion, it's not enough. Sorry, Wake Forest, you would get the boot. I think Syracuse would get the boot. They do have a decent basketball brand, but it's not like a Duke level basketball brand. So they would need something from their football, and they are not getting anything from their football right now. Look, Syracuse's brand in football used to be elite. Seriously, elite. When they were in the Big East, early to mid 90s, even late 90s, their brand in football was pretty stinking good. Right now, it's trash. You would get the boot, Syracuse. And finally, Boston College. Boston College has nothing to hang their hat on. Football, basketball, brand strength, TV revenue, and they're in a Boston market. Problem is, people in Boston don't care about Boston College. So that TV market is a moot point. Boston College would get the boot. On to the Big Ten, the teams that would be safe. Ohio State, need I say more? Michigan, same thing. These guys are massive money makers for the Big Ten. Same for Penn State. I think their brand is a little bit weaker than Ohio State and Michigan, but it's still a pretty stinking strong brand, and they make a lot of money. I think Wisconsin would be safe. Michigan State would be safe. Nebraska down in football, but they would be safe. Iowa safe. Purdue safe. Minnesota, barely by the skin of their teeth. Safe though. And then Illinois with their basketball success, I think they would be safe. But the teams that would be getting the boot, Maryland. And I'm trying not to smile over that, but yeah, Maryland would get the boot. Their football is trash right now. They did have a winning season, 7-6, but that's like an amazing year for Maryland right now. And their basketball's in the dumps as well. So yeah, I'd say Maryland gets the boot. I begrudgingly say that I think Indiana would get the boot. I know Indiana fans are going to get mad at me for that one because Indiana has had a historic basketball brand. But right now, it's in the dumps. If you could get that going relatively soon, then you would be safe. But right now, Northwestern, like once every 8 years, they have an amazing college football season, but in between, nothing. And they don't really bring in all that much revenue for football or basketball. I'm sorry, Northwestern, you're not safe. You'd get the boot. Then, of course, the same thing with Rutgers. I mean, they were an amazing football powerhouse when football was started. But now, they are a complete joke in football and basketball. They have not one single argument they could make from getting the boot. Sorry, Rutgers, you would get the boot. Now on to the Big 12, the brands that would be safe. BYU, Kansas because of basketball. West Virginia would be safe. That's not a homer pick. Look at historical stats. West Virginia has been one of the most successful football and basketball programs in the nation. I do think Oklahoma State would be fine. Baylor, their recent brand is strong enough. They're making money for the Big 12. I think Kansas State would be safe. Cincinnati, and by the way, I'm counting the new additions to the Big 12 and not counting the people that are leaving. So this is the new Big 12. I think Cincinnati would be safe, especially with football now. Iowa State would be fine. Houston would be fine. And I also think UCF would be fine. I also think Texas Tech would be fine, especially with their basketball brand getting much better in the past decade. So that means there's one team that would probably get the boot if this was based off football and basketball. That would be TCU. TCU was the buzz coming into the Big 12. Now they're the buzzkill because they have slowly but surely declined, and now they're at an all-time low right now. If they can rebound, then they would avoid this cut. But right now, in the state of affairs that TCU is as a brand, they would get the boot from the Big 12. Let's move on to the Pac-12. The brands that are completely safe. USC, for obvious reasons. Same goes for Oregon. And UCLA's TV market and brand strength would keep them safe as well. I think Washington would be safe. They're in a down period with their football team, but their brand is strong enough to where that'll rebound in a few short years. I think Utah's fine. I think their football brand is actually at an all-time high. And even though Colorado's been struggling recently, I think their brand is strong enough. They bring enough money in for the Pac-12 that they would be fine. I think Arizona State would be fine with recent success in football, and Arizona's basketball brand would keep them safe. And at times, they're pretty good in football. And the same thing with Washington State. They're up and down and up and down. But the brand strength, I think, is there, and they would avoid getting the boot. The teams that would get the boot, I think Oregon State, you would get the boot. I just don't think your brand is strong enough to avoid that based on football and basketball. Same goes for Stanford. I know I'm going to get a lot of boos from Stanford fans on that one because you did have some football success under Jim Harbaugh and some under David Shaw. But that was a short, sustained amount of success. And now you're in the crapper again. And the same thing goes for Cal. I think Cal would get the boot from the Pac-12 based on their football and basketball. And finally, all you SEC fans, which team would get the boot from the SEC? You know what? I'm going to skip semantics. We all know the answer. It's just one, Vanderbilt. Everybody else would be safe. Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, LSU, Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn, Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi State, and South Carolina, you're all safe. The only team that would get the boot is Vanderbilt. And I know Vanderbilt has a good baseball brand, but really, how much revenue does baseball bring in? This is based off of basketball and football, and Vanderbilt is terrible on both ends of that. Sorry, Vanderbilt fans, you would get the boot from the SEC if this were based on football and basketball. Now back to the real world. We all know that conferences really don't boot members. I've never seen it happen unless it happened in the past before I was born. So in real life, all your teams are safe. But with conference realignment and expansion, some of these conferences could get picked apart and your team might not get picked. Something to think about in the future. So give me your opinions in the comments of this video based strictly on football and basketball. Who would you boot from each Power 5 conference? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.